I found a camera in my living room, and what it recorded destroyed my family. The smoke detector fell during the outage. I was standing in the kitchen when the house went dark, and seconds later, I heard the crack of plastic hitting hardwood in the living room. The power came back within a minute. When I walked into the front room with my flashlight still in hand, the detector lay in two pieces near the baseboards. The ceiling mount dangled empty, wires exposed. I bent to pick up the pieces. That is when I saw the lens. It was small, embedded in what I had assumed was a ventilation grid. The detector's battery compartment hung open, and behind it, a micro SD card sat in a slim slot I had never noticed before. My hands stayed steady as I removed the card and carried both pieces to my desk. I did not rush. I have learned that the truth waits patiently for those who are willing to see it. The footage began 3 months earlier. I am not the kind of man who rages. My wife Ellen used to say I had the temperament of deep water, calm on the surface, with currents that only moved when they needed to. She died 2 years ago last April. The house has been quieter since. I make my coffee at 6 each morning, read the paper in the breakfast nook, and keep the rooms she loved exactly as she left them. The garden still gets tended every Saturday. The porch light stays on until I go to bed. Our son Michael is 41. Our daughter Jessica is 38. They both live within 20 minutes of the house. Michael works in commercial insurance and carries himself with the kind of confidence that comes from never having been truly tested. Jessica teaches at the community college and has her mother's sharp eyes but not her kindness. They visit on Sundays, usually. They ask about my health and whether I need anything from the store. I thought these visits were filial duty. I was wrong about what they were. The first video file was dated June 12th. I recognized my living room from the wide angle, the camera positioned to capture the entire space. The timestamp read 2:15 in the afternoon. I had been at the hardware store that day, buying washers for the guest bathroom sink. Michael and Jessica sat on the sofa, the one Ellen and I bought when we moved into this house 34 years ago. "He left the stove on again," Michael said. His voice carried the tone of someone discussing a broken appliance. Jessica leaned forward, elbows on her knees. "Last week he asked me the same question 3 times in 10 minutes. We need to talk about options." Michael's phone was in his hand. He did not look at his sister when he spoke. "He is not going to agree to assisted living." "Then we do not ask." The video continued for another 7 minutes. They discussed memory care facilities, durable power of attorney, and the equity in the house. They used my confusion as fact and my independence as a problem to be solved. When they left, they locked the outage door behind them, with the spare key I had given them for emergencies. I turned off the monitor. My coffee had gone cold. Outside, a car passed slowly on the street, and I watched its taillights disappear around the corner. I've never left the stove on. I've never repeated a question out of confusion. My mind is sound, my memory clear. I balance my checkbook by hand every month and can recite every medication I take, the dosage, and the purpose. What I had just witnessed was not concern. It was strategy. The next file was dated June 19th. This time, Jessica came alone. She walked through the house with her phone held up, recording. She opened drawers in my bedroom, checked the medicine cabinet, and spent 5 minutes in my office photographing papers on my desk. The documents were tax records, nothing sensitive, but she shot them from every angle as though building evidence. "This is good," she said to her phone. "Shows he is not keeping up with things." My desk had been organized that morning. I keep files in labeled folders, bills in a tray by the lamp, and correspondence in a wooden box Ellen gave me years ago. There was no disorder to document. Jessica was manufacturing it. I watched 3 more files that evening. In one, Michael spoke to someone on the phone while standing in my hallway. He mentioned my age, used the phrase declining faculties, and asked about the timeline for conservatorship proceedings. In another, both of them sat at my kitchen table with a woman I did not recognize, a real estate agent based on the business card she left on the counter. They discussed listing prices and staging. I did not sleep that night. I sat in my chair by the window and watched the street. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. The wind moved through the oak tree in the front yard, the one I planted the year Michael was born. By dawn, I had made a list. First, I needed to understand how long this had been going on. Second, I needed to know what actions they had already taken. Third, I needed to protect what was mine. Fourth, I needed to do it without them knowing I knew. The camera had been installed sometime in early June. I checked my credit card statements and found a charge to a security equipment retailer on June 4th. The card was attached to my account, but I had not made the purchase. Michael had access to the account as a backup, something I had arranged after Ellen died, in case I needed help managing finances. He had used my money to buy the camera that spied on me. I called the bank the next morning and asked for a full transaction history going back 6 months. The representative, a young woman with a patient voice, walked me through accessing the online portal. I found 4 other charges I had not authorized, 2 at legal offices, 1 at a medical clinic I had never visited, 1 at a print shop. I wrote down every detail, dates, amounts, business names. Then I called each one. The first legal office, specialized in elder law. When I gave them my name, the receptionist hesitated before saying they could not discuss client matters without consent. I told them I was the client, or at least I suspected I was, and I needed to know what consultation had occurred. She put me on hold. A man's voice came on, introducing himself as an attorney. He confirmed that Michael had come in for a consultation regarding conservatorship options, but that no retainer had been paid. He had been gathering information. The second legal office had no record of my name, but confirmed that someone matching Michael's description had asked about power of attorney documents and the process for having them executed when the principal was unable to make informed decisions. The medical clinic required more persuasion. I explained that I was investigating potential fraud and needed to know if any records existed under my name. After transferring me twice, a nurse manager told me that Michael had brought in a request for my medical records, claiming he needed them for insurance purposes. They had not released anything because I had not signed a consent form. He had tried. That was enough. The print shop had produced flyers. The owner remembered the order because it had been unusual. 500 copies of a missing person template with my photo left blank for contact information. Michael had not picked them up. When I asked why, the owner said Michael had called a week later and canceled, saying the situation had been resolved. I thanked him and hung up. Then I sat at my desk and read over my notes. The shape of the plan became clear. They intended to create a narrative of decline, gather evidence to support it, and move quickly once they had everything in place. The missing person flyers suggested they had considered more extreme measures, perhaps staging a disappearance to justify emergency intervention. I am a patient man, but I'm not a passive one. That afternoon, I drove to a different law office, one across town where no one in my family had connections. The attorney I met with, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and a firm handshake, listened without interruption as I explained the situation. She asked to see the video files. I'd transferred them to a flash drive that morning. She watched in silence, making notes on a legal pad. When the last file ended, she leaned back in her chair and folded her hands. "This is elder financial abuse," she said, "possibly conspiracy to commit fraud. At minimum, it is breach of fiduciary duty." What can I do? Several things. First, we revoke any existing powers of attorney and create new ones that explicitly exclude your children. Second, we draft a living trust that protects your assets and names an independent trustee. Third, we file a police report documenting the unauthorized charges and the surveillance. Fourth, if you want, we pursue a restraining order. I considered this. I want to handle it differently. She waited. I want them to know I know. I want them to understand the cost of what they have done, but I do not want police involvement unless it becomes necessary. That is your choice, she said, but you need protection in place first. We spent the next 2 hours drafting documents. She explained every clause, every protection, every contingency. By the time I left, I had a plan that was both legal and final. Michael called that evening. His voice was casual, asking if I needed anything from the store. I told him I was fine. He asked if I had been feeling well, said I had seemed tired lately. I told him I had never felt better. "You're sure?" he said. "Because Jessica mentioned you seemed confused last week." "I am sure." There was a pause. "Okay, well, we are coming by Sunday." The usual time. I will be here. I spent the next 3 days organizing. I made copies of every document the attorney had prepared. I downloaded all the video files to 3 separate drives. I opened a new bank account at a different institution and transferred 70% of my savings. I changed the locks on the house. I installed my own cameras, visible ones, at the front and back doors. On Saturday, I visited Ellen's grave. I brought fresh flowers and stood there for a long time, telling her what I had learned and what I was about to do. The wind carried the scent of cut grass. A crow called from the fence line. I thought she would approve. She had always despised dishonesty. Sunday arrived clear and cool. I made coffee and set the table in the dining room, a space we usually did not use for casual visits. I placed 3 folders at 3 chairs. Mine was at the head. I waited. They arrived at 11. I heard Michael's key in the lock, the one that no longer worked. He tried it twice before knocking. I opened the door and stepped aside. "Did you change the locks?" Michael's face showed confusion, then annoyance. "I did." "Why?" "Come in, we need to talk." Jessica followed him into the hallway, her eyes moving over the visible cameras. "Dad, what's going on?" "Sit down in the dining room." They exchanged glances. That look passed between them, the one that said, "Humor, the old man." They sat. I remained standing. "I found something interesting last week," I said. "A camera, hidden in the smoke detector." Michael's expression did not change, but his hands went still. Jessica looked at the folders on the table. "I do not know what you were talking about," Michael said. I opened the laptop I had placed on the sideboard and turned it so they could see the screen. I played the first video, then the second, then the third. I did not say anything while they watched. Jessica's face went pale. Michael stared at the screen with his jaw tight. When the videos ended, I sat down. "You used my money to spy on me. You consulted attorneys about taking control of my assets. You tried to access my medical records without permission. You discussed selling my house while I still live in it." "Dad, this is not what it looks like," Jessica started. "Do not." My voice stayed level. "I have recordings. I have transaction records. I have statements from the businesses you contacted." Michael leaned forward. "We were trying to help. You have been showing signs." "Name one," he faltered. "You seem forgetful." "Give me an example." He could not. Jessica tried next. "You have been withdrawn, not yourself." "I have been grieving. That is not incompetence." The silence stretched. I opened the folders and slid them across the table. "These are new power of attorney documents. You are removed. These are changes to my will. Your inheritance is now conditional on a full accounting of every dollar you have taken or attempted to take. These are bank statements showing I have moved my assets beyond your reach, and these," I placed a final set of papers between them, "are affidavits documenting your actions, signed and notarized. If you contest any of this, they will be filed with the court and the police." Michael's hands trembled as he picked up the papers. Jessica sat frozen. "You can leave now," I said. "Dad, please." Jessica's voice cracked. "We can fix this." "You can leave." Michael stood first. His face had gone red, anger replacing shock. "You're making a mistake. You need us." "I needed you to be honest. You chose otherwise." They left without another word. I locked the door behind them and returned to the dining room. The folders lay open on the table. Outside, their car started and pulled away too fast, tires chirping on the asphalt. I sat alone in the quiet house and felt nothing but clarity. The following week brought attempts at reconciliation. Jessica sent texts apologizing, asking to talk. Michael left voicemails that started conciliatory and ended accusatory. I did not respond. My attorney sent them formal letters reiterating the new arrangements and the consequences of further contact without consent. On Thursday, Michael's wife called. I did not know her well. She was crying, saying I was tearing the family apart, that Michael had made mistakes but meant well. I listened until she finished. "He meant to take what was mine," I said. "That is not a mistake. That is a choice." She hung up. Friday brought a visit from Jessica. She rang the doorbell and waited on the porch where the camera could see her. I opened the door but did not invite her in. "I am sorry," she said. Her eyes were red. "Truly. I let Michael convince me you were declining. I should have questioned it." You should have talked to me. I know. She looked down at her hands. Can we find a way past this? Not yet. Maybe not ever. That depends on you. What do you need? I need you to understand that trust is not rebuilt with apologies. It is rebuilt with years of different behavior. I do not have many years left. You will have to decide if you want to use them earning back what you lost. She nodded slowly and turned to leave. At the bottom of the steps, she stopped. Mom would be ashamed of us. Yes, I said, she would. I closed the door and watched through the window as she walked to her car. She sat behind the wheel for a long time before driving away. 2 days later, I received a letter from an attorney I did not recognize. Michael had retained counsel. The letter accused me of undue influence, claimed I was suffering from paranoid delusions, and threatened legal action to have my competency evaluated. It cited the changed locks, the security cameras, and my refusal to communicate as evidence of mental deterioration. I read it twice, then called my attorney. She was not surprised. This is a predictable escalation. He is trying to establish a pattern that supports his original narrative. What do? We respond with facts. I will draft a letter detailing your cognitive function, your financial management history, and the evidence of their misconduct. More importantly, I am scheduling you for an independent cognitive assessment with a neuropsychologist. We will have documentation that you are of sound mind. When? Tomorrow, if you can manage it. We need to move quickly. The assessment took 3 hours. The neuropsychologist, a soft-spoken man with graying temples, put me through memory tests, logic puzzles, and detailed questioning about my daily routines. He asked about my medical history, my medications, my sleep patterns. He had me draw a clock, repeat sequences of numbers, and solve problems that required planning and reasoning. At the end, he closed his folder and looked at me directly. You are functioning at a high level for any age. Your memory is intact, your reasoning is sound, and you show no signs of cognitive impairment. In fact, you scored better than average across all domains. Can you document that? I will have a full report ready within 48 hours. My attorney received the report on Wednesday. She immediately sent it to Michael's lawyer along with a detailed response to his accusations. The response included copies of the video evidence, the unauthorized transaction records, and affidavits from the businesses Michael and Jessica had contacted. It ended with a clear warning that any further attempts to challenge my competency would result in criminal complaints for elder abuse and fraud. Michael's attorney did not respond, but Michael himself did. He came to the house on Friday evening, just after dark. I saw him on the security camera feed, standing on the porch without knocking. He stood there for several minutes, hands in his pockets, staring at the door. Then he sat down on the top step. I watched him through the monitor in my office. He looked smaller somehow, his shoulders curved forward. After 10 minutes, he pulled out his phone and made a call. I could not hear what he said, but the conversation was brief. He stood, walked to his car, and sat in the driver's seat without starting the engine. The street was quiet. A few porch lights glowed in the distance. The oak tree moved gently in the breeze. Michael finally started the car and drove away. I did not feel triumph. I felt the weight of what had been lost and what could not be recovered. The next morning, my attorney called with news. Michael had withdrawn his legal threat. His attorney had sent a terse letter stating that his client was no longer pursuing action and requested no further contact. Does this mean it is over? I asked. For now. But you should maintain vigilance. People like this do not always accept defeat gracefully. She was right to warn me. 3 weeks passed without incident. I fell back into routines, adjusting to the new normal of solitude and caution. The garden needed attention. I hired the neighbor's son to help with the fall cleanup, and we spent a Saturday morning raking leaves and trimming back the perennials Ellen had planted. The boy worked steadily, asking occasional questions about the plants. He reminded me of Michael at that age, before ambition and entitlement had hardened him. On a Tuesday afternoon, I received a call from my bank. The representative sounded concerned. Mr. Harris, we have received a subpoena requesting your account records. My hand tightened on the phone. From whom? A law firm representing Michael Harris. They claim there are concerns about financial exploitation and they need to review your transactions for the past year. Can they do that? The subpoena appears valid. We are required to comply unless you file an objection. I thanked her and immediately called my attorney. She listened with growing frustration. He's trying another angle. If he can access your records, he can claim any unusual activity supports his incompetence theory. It is a fishing expedition. Can we stop it? Yes. We file a motion to quash the subpoena and request a protective order. I will need you to come in this afternoon. I drove to her office through lunch hour traffic. We spent 2 hours preparing documents that detailed the history of the case, the previous false accusations, and the clear pattern of harassment. She filed the motion electronically while I waited. This will take a few days to resolve, she said. In the meantime, I want you to document everything, any contact, any unusual events, anything that seems off. I went home and reviewed the security footage from the past 3 weeks. Nothing stood out at first. Then I noticed a pattern. A dark sedan had driven past my house multiple times over the course of 2 weeks, always in the evening, always slowing near my driveway. The license plate was partially visible in one frame. I called my attorney and sent her the footage. She had a private investigator run the plate. It came back registered to a company that provided surveillance services. Michael had hired someone to watch me. The motion hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. My attorney advised me not to attend, but I insisted. I wanted to see Michael face the consequences of his actions in a formal setting. The courtroom was small, wood-paneled, with fluorescent lights that hummed faintly. Michael sat with his attorney at one table. I sat with mine at the other. We did not look at each other. The judge, a woman in her 60s with reading glasses on a chain, reviewed the filings with careful attention. She asked Michael's attorney to explain the basis for the subpoena. He stood and launched into a practice speech about concerns for my welfare, the need to protect vulnerable seniors, and the duty to investigate potential exploitation. The judge cut him off. Who is allegedly exploiting your client's father? The attorney hesitated. We believe there may be undue influence from outside parties. Do you have evidence of this? We are seeking evidence through the subpoena. That is not how this works. The judge turned to my attorney. Response? She stood and laid out the facts in a calm, methodical presentation. The video evidence of the conspiracy, the unauthorized transactions, the false allegations, the prior legal threats, the surveillance. She presented it all without emotion, letting the actions speak for themselves. The judge looked at Michael. Is this accurate? Michael's attorney started to respond, but the judge raised a hand. I am asking your client. Michael stood slowly. His face was pale. There were misunderstandings. Misunderstandings. The judge removed her glasses. Mr. Harris, you placed a surveillance camera in your father's home without his knowledge. You accessed his financial accounts without authorization. You consulted with attorneys about taking control of his assets. You made false claims about his mental capacity. And now you are attempting to access his private financial records through a subpoena based on fabricated concerns. Does that about cover it? Michael said nothing. The motion to quash is granted. The subpoena is invalid. Furthermore, I am issuing a protective order prohibiting any further attempts to access Mr. Harris's financial, medical, or personal records without clear and convincing evidence of legitimate need. Any violation will result in sanctions. She looked at Michael's attorney. I suggest you advise your client carefully about his next steps. The hearing ended. Michael left without looking at me. His attorney gathered papers in silence. Outside the courthouse, my attorney turned to me. That was as definitive as it gets. He cannot touch you now without facing serious consequences. Will he stop? I think he will. The judge put him on notice. If he continues, he risks criminal charges. She was right. Michael did not contact me again. The surveillance car stopped appearing. The phone calls ceased. The legal threats evaporated. But Jessica continued her slow approach. Every Sunday, a text message. Every message, small piece of her life shared without expectation. She did not ask for forgiveness. She did not push for reconciliation. She simply existed at a distance, waiting. One Sunday in November, I responded. How's your teaching? Her reply came within minutes. Busy. Good. Thank you for asking. We exchanged 3 more messages that day. Brief, careful, feeling our way through the wreckage. It was not repair. It was the beginning of assessment, seeing what might be salvaged and what had to be left behind. Winter came early that year. The first snow fell in mid-November, covering the garden in white silence. I stood at the kitchen window and watched it accumulate on the branches of the oak tree. The house was warm, the mortgage was paid, the accounts were secure. I thought about Ellen and what she would make of all this. She had believed in second chances, but not in foolish trust. She had taught our children to be honest, to work hard, to respect others. Michael had forgotten those lessons. Jessica might remember them, given time. I made my coffee and sat in the breakfast nook with the paper. The headlines spoke of distant troubles, political theater, the usual human complications. I read them with detachment. My world had contracted to what I could control and what I could protect. The phone rang once that afternoon, an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. No message was left. Later, I walked through the house checking locks and lights, a routine that had become habit. In my office, the folders containing all the evidence sat in a locked drawer. The video files were backed up in 3 locations. The legal documents were filed and recorded. Everything was in order. I had protected what was mine. I had established boundaries. I had proven my competence against false accusations. I had done all of this without rage, without theatrics, without losing myself in the process. The cost was loneliness. The cost was the knowledge that my children had been willing to betray me for money and convenience. The cost was the loss of the family I thought I had. But the alternative would have been worse. The alternative would have been surrendering my dignity, my autonomy, and my home to people who saw me as an obstacle rather than a father. I chose clarity over comfort. I chose truth over peace. I chose myself. The house settles around me as evening comes. I turn on the lamp by my chair and open a book Ellen gave me years ago, one I have read many times. The pages are familiar, the words like old friends. Outside, the snow continues to fall, muffling the world in white silence. I am alone, but I am not defeated. I am watchful, but I am not afraid. I am aging, but I am not diminished. I am enough. I always was. And to anyone who tries to take that from me will learn what I learned from a hidden camera and a smoke detector. The truth is patient, but it does not forgive. The porch light stays on until I go to bed. Old habit, a beacon for anyone who might need to find their way home. Jessica might someday. Michael will not. I have made peace with both outcomes. Tomorrow, I will rise at 6, make my coffee, and read the paper. The garden will wait under snow for spring. The house will remain mine. The days will pass one at a time, each one earned, each one chosen. That is enough for any man.